name is Chanel Williams with the South Carolina Energy Office, and thank you for attending our Lunch and Learn in celebration of Clean Energy Week. Today's Lunch and Learn will focus on electric cars and how they work. Basically, it's an EV 101 with basics for people who want to know more about electric vehicles, who are considering purchasing electric vehicles, or if you're just curious. So that's what we will cover. Next slide, please. Our two speakers today are Stacy Washington, the Senior Program Manager here at the Energy Office, and Renee Kelly, the Clean Transportation Coordinator at the Energy Office. Stacy will be speaking from the perspective, not only as someone working in the Energy Office, but someone who owns an electric vehicle, so she can give you her experience with owning an EV. And Renee will talk more about, Renee will talk more about the details of what it's like to purchase an electric vehicle, how they work, what the difference between an electric vehicle and internal combustible engine vehicles, or your standard gas vehicle. You'll learn more about all of the acronyms later, don't worry. So Renee will be talking about some of those things. So we have two wonderful experts here, and I really look forward to hearing everything they say, and I hope you do too. Okay, next slide, please. So a few housekeeping notes. Your controls, your WebEx controls, obviously we're using WebEx today. Your WebEx controls are at the bottom of the window, as you can see in the slide. Everyone is muted right now. We will be able to unmute you at the end to ask questions if you raise your hand. Or if you would rather not ask your questions on camera, then you can put your questions in the Q&A box. We actually prefer this because it allows us to keep track of all the questions. But again, if you do need to speak and use your voice, if your question is better asked using your voice, then you can raise your hand and we will unmute you. So we also have the chat feature. I want to hear where everyone is located. Feel free to say hello, put your name and location in the chat, and we can just keep track and see where people are located across South Carolina. It would be great to know that information. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded. A link to the webinar recording will be shared after the webinar has ended. Okay, now with that, next slide, we can move on to our first presenter, Renee Kelly.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Chanel said, my name is Renee Kelly. I am the Transportation Coordinator at the South Carolina Energy Office and the Director of Palmetto Clean Fuels. Next slide. The South Carolina Energy Office is funded through the U.S. Department of Energy State Energy Program and is a part of the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff. Our mission is to promote energy efficiency, renewable energy, and clean transportation. We provide technical assistance, financial assistance, education and outreach, and we maintain energy data resources. Next slide. Excuse me. Palmetto Clean Fuels is a part of the Clean Cities Coalition. We are the sole coalition in South Carolina. Next slide. Palmetto Clean Fuels is a part of the National Network of Clean Cities programs, and we've been in operation since 2004. We provide technical assistance, information resources, online tools, and data. Palmetto Clean Fuels is fuel agnostic. We look at all the alternative fuels. We are also a forum for stakeholders representing alternative fuels. In addition, we have the Plug-in SC program, which recommends EV charging station signage, pavement markings, and directional signage for new charging stations, new and existing charging stations. Next slide. So let's talk about electric vehicles. Electricity has been an alternative fuel under the Energy Policy Act since 1992. Next slide. Here are all the key acronyms for EVs. EVs by itself means all electric vehicles. EVSE means electric vehicle supply equipment, but it relates to the electric vehicle charging infrastructure, including charging stations. ICE, internal combustion engine, as Chanel pointed to earlier, talks to regular gasoline engines that everybody is familiar with. EVs include battery electric vehicles, hybrid electric vehicles, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, plug-in electric vehicles. And then there are other acronyms that are listed here. Next slide. So why the emphasis on electric vehicles? Transportation is the highest carbon emitting sector in the US. Electric vehicles are considered zero emission vehicles and can drastically reduce tailpipe emissions. Large-scale adoption of electric vehicles have the potential to have a profound effect on the transportation sector. To the right, you can see all the different fuels and how that mix has changed over time. Next slide. Transportation electrification is happening now. So what's happening? We've received a huge influx of cash or funding from the federal government. We've got rapid deployment of EVs from different manufacturers. We've also had an increase in consumer demand. And so the resulting impact is that transportation will be the largest growth sector for electricity. The graph on the right shows the projected forecast of how much we think transportation will have an effect on electricity. And you can see those numbers go out to 2050. Next slide. Electricity is considered an alternative fuel. This means regulated fleets can use qualified electric vehicles to meet their alternative fuel requirements. EVs store electricity in batteries to power one or more electric motors. These batteries are charged primarily by plugging them into off-board sources of electricity, charging stations, maybe your house, and can be produced from a variety of energy sources. EVs also use electricity through regenerative braking. Regenerative braking means that the electric motor in your electric vehicle is operated in reverse, thereby applying a braking force through electromagnetism. This recaptures some of the vehicle's kinetic energy and charges the battery. Next slide. Here are the different vehicle types we're discussing today. Conventional gas vehicles is the gas engine and a 12-volt battery. The conventional hybrid has a gas engine and an electric motor. It also has two batteries. It has that 12-volt battery that we're used to, but it also has another battery to store power and to handle electric vehicle functions like the regenerative braking. Next slide. We also have plug-in hybrids. They have two engines. They have the electric motor and the gas engine or the internal combustion engine. They also have a larger battery and they can go longer distances. The electric or battery electric vehicle has a huge battery with an electric motor and it has zero tailpipe emissions. It can also go longer distances. Next slide. So what are the benefits of electric vehicles? They offer the opportunity to lower fuel costs, to reduce emissions, and to contribute to energy security. There's fuel economy because electric vehicles utilize higher efficient equipment, and have lower cost for the energy. And thus they have better fuel economy. EVs are measured by MPGE. Now we know for gas engines, we're usually measured off of MPG, or miles per gallon. But the MPGE, the miles per gallon equivalent, is the standard for EVs. So think of a light duty EV. That could exceed, that rating could exceed 100 MPGE, driving 100 miles and using only 25 to 40 kilowatt hours. So a relatively low amount of energy used for 100 miles to get that MPGE, or miles per gallon equivalent number. Also, tailpipe emissions. EVs produce zero tailpipe emissions. Hybrid vehicles also produce zero tailpipe emissions when they're in the all-electric mode. When they're not in the gas, and then they're in the gas mode, then they do produce emissions. Also, energy security. The transportation sector accounts for 30% of the total U.S. energy needs, and 70% of that is through U.S. petroleum consumption. So the more vehicles that transition to electricity as a fuel source, the less we will be dependent on carbon-based fuels. The considerations. Electric vehicle price tags can be significantly higher than gas vehicles. However, the prices are coming down rapidly as production volumes increase. The infrastructure availability. Public charging stations are not as available as gas stations, but charging equipment manufacturers, automotive OEMs, utilities, clean cities coalitions, municipalities, and government agencies are working to expand that network. Homeowners can also have the option to charge their vehicle at home using a standard outlet or installable EV equipment, and they often charge overnight for convenience and cost. Batteries, like engines in conventional vehicles, the advanced batteries in EVs are designed for extended life, but will wear out eventually. NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, indicates that today's batteries may last up to 8 to 12 years in extreme climates. Next slide. Energy storage systems, such as batteries, are essential for electric drive vehicles. Most EVs use the lithium-ion batteries, which are similar to the batteries found in cell phones and laptop computers. But there are also nickel metal hydride batteries that are used in the hybrid electric vehicles and are easily recycled. Finally, there are also lead acid batteries that can be designed to be high power and inexpensive, safe, and reliable. And then finally, the ultracapacitors. That's another source of energy storage, and they provide additional power during acceleration and hill climbing, and to help cover braking energy. Next slide. On the left, you see a charging connector. On the right, you see the chart talking about the different levels of charging. Level 1, or slow charging, is done at 120 volt and best done at home. Also best done in the evenings when electricity is off of their peak timings. Level 2 is the fast charging that you see generally around town, but can also have at your home. And that's done at 240 volts, but can be done at home or at work. Many parking lots are starting to get level 2 chargers so that folks that are working can charge their vehicles while they work. Level 3 DC fast charging ranges from 240 volts to 480 volts and can be found mostly on the road as you're going around town or in and out of different cities. Next slide. 80% of charging occurs at home or at work. And then 20% of charging occurs while traveling in and out of town. Level 1 charging, the charging that's mostly done at home, can be done overnight and takes about 16 hours. Level 2 can take about 4 to 8 hours to fully charge. And then DC charging, the charging on the go, can charge about 80% of your battery in 30 minutes. Next slide. This is a graph showing the rise of EV charging stations in the US. You can see in 2011, you can see that rise in the number of charging stations and charging ports through 2021. Next slide. In this graph, you can see the two maps from South Carolina that show a rapid increase in EV infrastructure since 2016. You can see the charging stations in blue, but you can also see on the right in the 2021 map, the green shaded areas that represents the increase in electric vehicle registrations in South Carolina. So EVs are growing. Next slide. Maintenance and safety. EVs typically need less maintenance than conventional gas vehicles. That's because the battery, the motor, and associated electronics require little to no regular maintenance. There are fewer fluids to change, and they have the regenerative braking that significantly reduces brake wear. They also have far few moving parts compared to a conventional gas vehicle. Because hybrid vehicles have the internal combustion engine or gas engine, their maintenance needs are similar to those of a regular vehicle that you've been dealing with in the past. The electric vehicle, electric drive, must meet the same safety requirements as gasoline vehicles. So they must be just as safe and with those same standard specifications. Next slide. As a result of the Inflation Reduction Act, the current EV tax credits were extended for new electric vehicles and EV chargers. However, there's also a new incentive for used electric vehicles, offering up to $4,000. There is also a fee for hybrid and electric vehicles, and it is added on to your vehicle registration fee. So whatever your vehicle registration fee would have been for the equivalent gas vehicle, for an electric vehicle, they add on $120. For a hybrid vehicle, they add on $60. Next slide. So getting started, questions to ask about getting involved with electric vehicles. The Alternative Fuel Data Center, federal and state laws and incentives, has a search on that page that's available for more information on incentives and can offset the cost and help you with your payback period for electric vehicles. The Palmetto Clean Fuels team can sit down with you and help you through the process of determining which EV and charging infrastructure needs best fit your application. My colleague, Stacy Washington, will discuss the questions that are listed on this sheet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Renee. As it's been mentioned, my name is Stacy Washington, and I am a senior program manager in the South Carolina Energy Office. Before I get into the questions, I just wanted to also mention that in 2021, we had our electric vehicle stakeholder initiative. During this initiative, we examined the legislative and regulatory environment in South Carolina and how we can implement EVs. We also identified the challenges and opportunities in this space, and we also developed recommendations to put forth for the state. This report from the initiative was published last week, so we encourage you to go to our website, energy.sc.gov. There's a link right there at the top. You can also use the QR code there to access the report. So let's get into those questions. So I want to preface my talk here by saying that I'm going to speak from my perspective on our state energy office Bolt and my personal vehicle Tesla. This is all just based on my experience, and some others may have other things to add, but I just wanted to give you a perspective from someone who has been one of those early adopters. So what federal, state, and local incentives are available? For the Bolt, since it was a state car, we don't pay taxes. There are no tax incentives for that vehicle. For the Tesla, at the time we purchased the vehicle, there were no federal tax incentives for the vehicle. They had already had the maximum amount allowed for Tesla. But we were able to take advantage of the federal charger incentive that has now been extended. So that is good, but we did not know about that incentive until we filed our taxes. So at the time of filing, my husband looked and said, hey, there's a tax incentive for a charger, and he was able to take advantage of that. So what are my driving range needs and what type of EV is best for me? For the Bolt, our Palmetto Clean Fuels department did an assessment looking at how we use the energy office vehicle, how many miles we travel to determine the best vehicle for us. And the Bolt came out on top. That would get us to and from most of our trips without needing a charge. So that was based on a range of the vehicle being 259 miles. But as some of you may know, there was a battery recall on the Bolt, and now we can only charge up to 80%. So that has affected how we travel throughout the state. But we are using the Bolt and enjoying learning and being early adopters. For the Tesla, we looked at our drive to Raleigh. That's my hometown, and we drive up there frequently. That is 209 miles from our home. The Tesla has enough range to get us to Raleigh with one charge, but we do make sure we charge on the way, but just to have that extra cushion. The Tesla, we have a Model Y. The range is 330 miles. And we looked at the charging infrastructure availability. On our route, as we would drive and we're considering an electric vehicle, we noted that there was a Tesla charger in Lumberton on our way up I-95, and we plan on charging there. So we do that. And in that time, ever since then, so many electric vehicle chargers have been added to the network that we have plenty of places to charge on the way in Raleigh and on the in South Carolina. How and where, I want to mention one more thing on the previous slide. Some other factors that factored into us choosing that car were just our family. We talked about Teslas. I have two boys and a husband, and they're all into cars and have been talking about the Tesla for years. My husband's friend had a Tesla and came, and I think that was a point where he said, if my friend has a Tesla, I can get a Tesla. So that helped. And also, we would go to the Drive Electric Columbia events. And before COVID, we were able to ride in the vehicles with the owners and get the feel for the vehicle. That's a good way to touch and see electric vehicles at these Drive Electric events. How and where will my EV be charged each day? For the Bolt, we use the City of Columbia parking deck, and they have a level 2 charger in the deck where we park, and we pay a monthly fee. For the Tesla, we knew we'd be charging at home, and we have a level 2 charger there. And I'll get into more details on that on the next slide. So what level of charging will I need? As I mentioned, for the Bolt, we use the City of Columbia parking deck, and they have a level 2 charger. When we charge on the go, we have charge at level 2 for destination charging, and level 3 when we need that fast charge. And just note that there are charging fees at these different chargers. For level 2, sometimes it's just the parking deck cost. For level 3, there's usually a charge per kilowatt hour. So you just need to make sure that you understand, your situation whenever you charge. For the Tesla, as I mentioned, we have a home charger that's a level 2 charger. And then we've used the Tesla superchargers on the go, and also use some level 2 for destination charging. And I also wanted to note, when we're talking about charging, if you do want to purchase a charger for your home, that can be about $400 or $500. Also installation costs from an electrician installing at your home. And then also note that when you are charging at home, your electric bill will increase slightly based on however much you charge at home. So just be aware of those additional costs for charger installation and for charging at your home. I also wanted to add some information in here about the purchase experience. Some people are wondering, how do you get an electric vehicle? What is it like? So for the Bolt, since it's a state vehicle, we use the state purchasing process. The Bolt is not on state contract. However, we do have a Leaf on state contract now, a Nissan Leaf. But since at the time there was no Bolt or electric vehicle on state contract at the time, we had to use the state purchasing process for something that's not on state contract. So that was a little bit of a process. So if you are a state entity and would like to purchase a vehicle that's not on state contract, we do have information to help you through that process. And as I mentioned, there is a Nissan Leaf on state contract, and there's some hybrids already on state contract as well, if that is of interest. So we ordered the vehicle in November 2019 and received it by March 2020. So it didn't take too long, compared nowadays with the supply chain issues. It's taking that long to get a vehicle, internal combustion engine vehicle. So, it's comparable. We also worked on parking negotiations with the city of Columbia, just to make sure that we were parked in a place that would not, so our car stays parked there. We didn't want to take up a charger, so we parked a couple of blocks away from our office. For the Tesla, we ordered it online in early December 2021, and we were told that it would be available in May of 2022. We were notified near about the middle to end of December 2021 that our vehicle was ready and would be available December 23rd through 27th. Well, that's Christmas, and we were going to be out of town, so we could not take advantage of it being ready early. So we got back on the list, and we picked up our vehicle in Charlotte in March 2022. Because there are no Tesla service centers in South Carolina, if you do purchase a Tesla, you will need to travel to Charlotte or Atlanta to pick up your vehicle. So just make note of that if you are interested in a Tesla. And on top of that, you also need to be ready. Everybody who's going to drive the vehicle has to be there. So if you put 2 people down, both people have to be there to pick the vehicle up. Just make sure that you're ready for that, because they tell you, and you have to be there the date that they tell you. And if it gets delayed, you still need to be there the next date, or you'll be moved to the next batch that's available. But the experience was great. We went to the service center. We had somebody that assisted us with the car. We went through a checklist and checked everything out, and we were ready to go. Are there charging stations in my area? Are they public or private, and can I visit? So one of the apps website that I use is PlugShare. It's crowdsourced information, so there may be not every station may be listed, but this is the images on the page here come from PlugShare. You can also use mapping apps like your Google or iPhone Maps and put in electric vehicle charger, and it'll show electric vehicle charging around you. And I just say do your research. You can just search electric vehicle charging at blah blah location to see if they have electric vehicle charging. And I just say plan. You have to plan your trip. If you are not someone who plans a trip, for where you're going to fuel when in your internal combustion engine vehicle, you will definitely need to plan for your electric vehicle. You just need to know where you're going to charge, if the chargers are working, that type of thing. And this will help you avoid range anxiety. So I have 2 images here from PlugShare to illustrate the difference in the Bolt and the Tesla and the availability of charging. We took a trip to Orangeburg in our Chevy Bolt for work. And on the picture on the bottom, you can see there's 3 charging locations on Highway 601 in Orangeburg. The green are level 2 chargers. So in Orangeburg, and they're at car dealerships, they have 3 on Highway 601. Level 2 charging, as you can see from when Renee presented, it takes longer to charge than level 3. So we would have to be there a few hours if we needed to charge. If I was taking my Tesla to the same location, I would be presented with 2 additional chargers. The orange is a fast charger. So you can see in the top picture, there's a fast charge or supercharger, level 3 charger at a new gas station on Highway 601, which would have quickly gotten me charged and on my way if I had taken the trip in the Tesla. So that's just some things to note as you're traveling and looking at charging availability. But as Renee mentioned, there's a lot of effort available to increase the infrastructure. And I just wanted to leave a few additional thoughts of things that I've learned along the way. There's more, but these are the 3 that I put here. So the stated battery mileage does not equal the actual mileage you will go or be able to go. For example, things like such as speed. If you're driving fast, that'll reduce the mileage that the battery can go. So for example, one day we were traveling in our Bolt from Myrtle Beach to Georgetown, and a lot of stop and go traffic on that route. And we really did not use much of the battery life or mileage on that trip because of the regenerative braking that Renee mentioned earlier. Every time we stopped at a light or reduced our speed, you could see the wheel turning and regenerating. And it was kind of satisfying, and as I looked at it, I was like, we're not really losing any mileage or any battery mileage here on that vehicle on that trip. Also, weather, extreme heat or extreme cold can affect the battery, the mileage that you're getting on the battery. Using your heat and AC can also affect it. And even the radio, just things you're doing in the car will affect that. And also fast charging, we've discovered that, every time that we have used one of those level 3 superchargers, that has affected the efficiency of the battery. Also, icing or internal combustion engine being parked in public chargers. That is something that we have noticed, and that's in the picture there. There's a Chevy Silverado parked at an electric vehicle charger. What if somebody needed that charger and there's another car parked there that's not even using it? That's a problem that's out there. And then there are multiple apps for charging on the go. I've had to download all the different apps because when you get to a charger, you can spend 5 or 10 minutes trying to figure out how to charge if you're not prepared or don't have all the different cards. So just be aware that you may need multiple apps. And that's also an initiative that's being worked on to consolidate all of that into one app. So I also wanted to mention that, I mentioned the Drive Electric Columbia event that we went to. There will be one, if you're interested, on October 8th in Columbia on Main Street from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Soda City Market. So if you're interested in looking at electric vehicles and seeing them, please feel free to come out on Saturday after next. And now I believe we will take any questions.
Yes, thank you, Stacy, and thank you, Renee. Excuse me. We do have a few questions, one in the Q&A box and a couple of questions and comments in the chat. So first question is, are the federal incentives for all new EV purchases, or are there restrictions to use the incentives, like where the vehicle is manufactured?
For EV incentives, I don't know that there's any restrictions on where the vehicle is manufactured. I think the EV incentives depend on currently right now depend on the type of vehicle and the requirements that they have in the Inflation Reduction Act. But I don't know that there's anything that says that you have to be in a specific state.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, was the up to $1,000 home charger installation tax incentive extended in the IRA?
Yes. That was extended, as well as for new electric vehicles. That 7,500 was extended as well. The $1,000 was extended for the home charger installation. And the used vehicle, $4,000 is a new incentive.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question is, why do all drivers have to be at the delivery? I guess, Stacy, that's for you.
Yeah, so when you order the vehicle, you put in the driver, and then you put in the license, the driver's license number. And whoever you put in on that vehicle when you purchase it has to be there. I think that's a Tesla thing. I guess to make sure everybody knows how to operate the vehicle. And that also, I guess, make sure you have the app and everything so you can get into the vehicle. But when they sent the information to saying your vehicle's ready, they said make sure everyone who was listed that was going to be driving the vehicle when you purchase the vehicle is there. So if I couldn't attend to pick up the vehicle, he couldn't pick up the vehicle because my name was on there when he ordered it.
Someone else made a comment in the chat that says they set up the Tesla app for each driver access and your driver profile, set settings, etc. You can add other drivers later, but it's easier if Tesla Tech sets it up for you. So that just kind of goes along with what you were saying. All right, next question. Do the new incentives in the IRA provide for charging stations at a public school district?
I don't think there's any restrictions on where they provide the incentive, whether it's for your home charger or for the school charging. But your states may have more information on other incentives that may be specifically for schools.
Okay, great. Thank you. Are there any more questions? I will wait a few seconds in the event that someone is having a last minute thought and still typing out their question. I know I can give a little personal side note that I was not very familiar with EVs prior to coming onto the Energy Office team, and I've learned so much. They are extremely cool vehicles, and I can see why they have grown in popularity. And it's good that there are more manufacturers putting them out there, so potential consumers have more options. Yes. Okay, now we have another question. Are all fast charging locations only for Teslas?
No. DC fast charging stations can be for all EVs, not just for Tesla.
I will say Tesla has its own network of chargers. So if it's a Tesla charger, but like Electrify America or a Charge Point or other, EV Go, they have fast chargers that anyone can use.
There is another question in the chat, but before we get to that, I have a question as well that I don't want to forget as we move on. So in our garage, in one of the City of Columbia garages, I think I saw a Tesla parked at a standard charger. Is that typical? Can Teslas use any charger, or can they only use Tesla chargers?
Teslas can use any charger. They have a connector that comes with the vehicle that you can use to be able to use a level 2, like in a parking garage.
But every car cannot use a Tesla charger.
Not at this moment.
Got it. Okay. Next question. How practical are solar-powered EV chargers at this point?
I think they would be practical definitely for the level 1 charging. where you can do the trickle charging at 120 volts. But when you're talking about doing DC fast charging, they would probably help supplement the power coming from the utility, but it wouldn't. I don't know that it would be enough to provide the voltage needed for the level 2 and level 3. But I do believe there are some that have solar as a part of the fuel that's supplementing the chargers.
And I'll add that there is a solar powered electric vehicle charger at R2I2 in Columbia. If anyone is in that area interested in seeing it, if they have a vehicle want to try it out. So there is one that I know of in South Carolina.
Stacy, can you explain what R2I2 is?
I was trying to remember the acronym.
Richland District 2
Innovation 2.
Innovation something. Okay, just so people have
So
context.
It's behind Sand Hills in Columbia.
Yes. Okay. Any more questions? Check all of my windows to make sure I'm not missing anyone. Also, if you have thought of a question, and like I said, it would be easier for you to ask it by speaking, feel free to raise your hand and you can ask it that way. I know sometimes typing out a question, A, takes a while. B, you can't always convey the message that you like to via text, especially if it's complicated. So feel free to raise your hand if you have a question or put it back in the Q&A box. I'll wait a couple of seconds to see if anyone has any brilliant thoughts that they would either like to share or burning questions they would like to ask. Okay, I will take that as, oh, here we go. There we are. There are a few more. Okay, based on the experience with the Bolt, would you buy another?
Yes, I would buy it. Go ahead, Stacy.
I was gonna say once they the battery recall is over, that'll definitely make it a better experience. But I have enjoyed driving the Bolt, and we've been able to get to Beaufort, St. Helena Island on it. You just need to make sure of where the charging is, but it's been a great experience so far.
I have been involved with both the Bolt with the Energy Office, but my husband actually worked on the Volt, the Chevy Volt, which was more of a sedan. I enjoyed the Bolt, B-O-L-T, because it's more of a utility vehicle where you can store more things inside of it. So it appears to actually have enough room for my golf clubs.
Okay, that actually does remind me of another question I had, probably for you, Renee. Can you explain what a light duty vehicle is and how, just give an example or how it compares to a heavy duty vehicle, perhaps?
Okay, so in the automotive classifications, a class 1 vehicle is basically a car or an SUV, and they're considered light duty. Medium duty usually is class 2 through 5, and then heavy duty is usually class 6, 7, and 8. And so as you go up in class, the size and weight of all those vehicles increase. So a light duty vehicle is a car or SUV in the class 1 designation.
Okay, great. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify. Another question, or a question and a request from me. Let me put out my request first. If you have an electric vehicle, whether it's fully electric, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, anything in the electric family, drop it in the chat. Just say, oh, I have one, or you can even list the name and model name of the model that you have. I'm just curious about how many EV owners we already have out there. So yes, drop it in the chat. Okay, next question. What about safety concerns at public charging?
I think the biggest thing as far as safety concerns, I think the electric vehicle charging manufacturers go through great lengths to make sure that, and working with the utilities, that the site or the charging station is safe. I think that proper operation of the connector to your vehicle is important, and ensuring that you're paying attention and not distracted when you're working with, that source of electricity. So I think safety has really been thought out well by the charging manufacturers and the utility to ensure that it's safe for everyone.
And I would like to add to another type of safety, or just going to the chargers and feeling safe. So some of the chargers are away from a building or tucked behind a building. There's no cover on the stations. That was also brought out in our electric vehicle stakeholder initiative to make sure that there's proper lighting, that the area itself is a safe place for someone to be in the middle of the night charging, in the middle of the day charging, because a lot of these chargers are behind the building, away from the building. And just to note that, and as we're installing infrastructure, even to have a cover over, when you go to the gas station, it's covered, but electric vehicle chargers are not covered from the rain. So we've had to stand out in the rain, to get charging started. If you're standing out there for 5 or 10 minutes, that can be a little bit of an issue if you haven't gotten everything set up. So those are some other considerations that came up in the electric vehicle stakeholder initiative. And so hopefully we'll get some of those answered as we're expanding.
Thank you. Okay, a comment and then a question. So we do have at least one EV owner. Yay! Hopefully there's still a lot of useful information in this webinar, despite the fact that, you're familiar with an EV and what EV ownership is like. Okay, another question. How much does it cost when you charge at a level 2 charger for an hour or so to get an 80% charge? Or can you really, or related to that, can either of you speak to the cost of charging at a public charging station in addition to that?
So I'll speak just from my personal experience. The level 2 chargers, public chargers that I've parked at, have not had a charge. They've been at parking garages, so I don't have any dollar figures on those. But for level 3, it's usually about 30 or 40 cents per kilowatt hour, depending where I am. It has varied. I even noticed a difference during peak at one place, because I went there at one point and it was like 30 something cents per kilowatt hour. And then I went to a different time and it was 40 something cents per kilowatt hour. And I said, I wonder if it's because it's during peak. Yeah, I didn't know that for sure, but it did change. So, and then the total session time on those times was about 40 minutes. And this was on the Bolt, about 40 minutes and about $20 to get me to 80%.
Okay.
75-80%.
All right. Hopefully that answers your question, Dennis. Are there any more questions before we wrap up? I really appreciate all the great questions that we've gotten today. So thank you all, and thank you for your attentiveness and your interaction in the chat. This has just been lovely. Okay, I guess that is it. There's nothing more in the chat or in the Q&A box. So Renee and Stacy, do you have any final thoughts that you would like to pass on to our viewers? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as the director of Palmetto Clean Fuels, alternative fuels are a great opportunity for us to reduce the carbon emissions, as well as look at alternative fuel opportunities to get our dependence off of petroleum and carbon-based fuels. I think that in working with the Energy Office, that I've really gotten a great opportunity to see how electric vehicles work, and that range anxiety is a real thing. And so just making sure that in getting an electric vehicle, that you review some of all of the questions that we posed today and that Stacy has gone through, so that you're making an educated decision when you go for your electric vehicle. Also, think about other fuels as well, especially if you work with a fleet of vehicles, because it's not just about electricity, but it's also about propane and compressed natural gas and hydrogen. Those are all other fueling opportunities that are coming this way as well. We're talking about EVs today, but I want everybody to keep an open mind about all of the alternative fuels.
Yes. We have one last minute question that came in. This will be the last one. And then Stacy, I'll give you an opportunity to give any closing thoughts that you would like to provide. Okay, last question. What is the cost of a replacement battery for a Tesla? Obviously, that's a question for you, Stacy.
Yeah, that is something that I am not sure of. We can get back to you on that. I don't know if we have the person's information. We can look that up and get back to you on that.
Let me write down this person's name, and I'm sure we can get your contact info from the registration. Fingers crossed we can do that.
Now, the cost of the battery, to change out the battery, will differ with the different manufacturers. I heard of a woman who bought a Ford Escape for $14,000, an EV for $14,000, and the battery went bad and she had to pay another $11,000 to get a new battery. But I don't think that's the cost for every battery for every manufacturer. So that's one of the things that you need to investigate when you're looking at purchasing an electric vehicle. I mean, it's kind of like printers, right? You want a good printer, but you don't want the printer whose cartridges cost, $1,000 a piece. You want something that's more in line with your budget.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both so much for all of the great information that you have provided today. Our contact information is on the screen, as you all can see. A few reminders. Please be sure to attend the Drive Electric event here in Columbia on October 8th at the Soda City Market from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. if you are interested in having a hands-on experience with an electric vehicle. And lastly, I want to remind you all to follow us on social media. This is Clean Energy Week, and we have been doing a lot of different posts with tips about energy efficiency and clean energy. So be sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook for general updates about what's happening in the office, as well as our celebrations for Clean Energy Week. October is Energy Action Month, and the South Carolina Energy Office will be doing a lot of fun activities and putting out a lot of information related to that. So again, stay tuned, follow us, and we'll see you next time. Thank you all.